This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta. Harvest season is here, and your friends at Syngenta want to extend a heartfelt wish for a safe and productive harvest season. Take extra care on the public roadways. Your safety matters as much as your yield. Your family is counting on your safe return home each night.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, October the 1st. Oh my gosh, October already! On this episode of the Word, setting records. Wow, far south. Plots and agronomy answers. Lots to talk about. Let's go! Unbelievable. The wheat yields are in, and we have set a new record in the province of Ontario. Now, I'll just preface this with I'm pushing to get the wheat yields to 1 decimal point because right now we only have them as rounded off to bushels, and it makes a difference. But if you do the math on the rounded numbers, we are at 100.4 bushels per acre average wheat yield for 2025 in the province of Ontario. It could be just under 100 if all those decimals go wrong, but we're going to stick with, we broke the 100 bushel mark, man, with 1 million acres. We were over 1 million acres to boot. For all of those old timers who remember back in the 1990s when Jim Whitelaw, rest his soul, worked with the Ontario Wheat Board, and the deal was, if we could get Ontario to 1 million acres and 100 bushel per acre average yield for the province, Wheat Pete would retire. Okay, I'm not likely going to retire. Maybe some people are all out there cheering, but nonetheless, unbelievable. 100 bushel per acre, that is quite incredible. And talking about records, wow. We continue to set records for how dry it is in parts of Ontario. And it's not everywhere because last week there were some areas that got up to 7 inches of rain. And one grower in particular saying to me, man, Pete, we got our beans combine, I think he said on the 18th or something like that. And we got all the cereals, the triticale and the winter wheat all planted by September the 20th. Man, we got done our fall work, other than perhaps corn, but we're all done seeding winter cereals in the summer because we didn't shift till summer until September the 21st. Lots of records being set, but talk about dry. So Mark, my good friend at Napanee, tweeting out a picture of corn crop that has stalled for the last 2 weeks. It's at half milk line. It is so droughted. I mean, it's not good to start with. It's short, but it just simply is not maturing. And it's not maturing because they still have no rain whatsoever. So incredibly dry air in some parts of Ontario. Other places, no doubt, are getting some rainfall, but in central Ontario, we are going to see some feed shortages. Donald leaving me a voicemail message about that. Yes, there's definitely some hurt from that standpoint, and we feel for those people, no question about that. And before I leave the weather, man, it has been wet in Western Canada to the point that they have mildew in the canola crop. Some places it's powdery mildew, apparently. Some places it is downy mildew. Dwayne sending me a message saying, my burn down did not work on my canola. Is it the downy mildew that is causing that issue? And yes, I'm astounded by this. I thought, come on, we have the disease. Yes, it coats the leaves, but we are going to get penetration. Those burn down products are going to work. No, in actual fact, at least the downy mildew is confirmed that it interferes with uptake of that herbicide, and so our burn downs on canola that is heavily infested with downy mildew certainly are not working the way that we would normally expect them to. I mean, all you can do is more water, make sure you're spraying on a sunny day, kind of in that noon to 3 p.m. period, and everybody in Western Canada right now is going, Johnson, do you know how many acres we have to cover? That just simply isn't possible. Yeah, if you want it to work with heat in the mix or Aragon, the same product, it really does matter what those environmental conditions are. And if the mildew is preventing herbicide uptake, they simply are not going to work from that standpoint. So lots of dust out in Western Canada as they're combining as well. That means fires, combine fires, is a concern. So just watch that. Adeline, on the other hand, from Romania, sending me an email. We correspond occasionally. He asked me some great questions about fertility and things, but it is so dry in Romania. They've had no rain for an extended period of time. I don't know if it's as long as central Ontario or not, or longer. But he planted his canola and actually had to turn the irrigation pivots on to get enough moisture there to germinate the canola. So it is dry in parts of Europe, that's for sure. All right, I want to move on. I just want to mention, hey, Ontario is a cool province, and it is big, and you can go far south in Ontario. So Saturday, we went on a guess where tour, and the guess where tour took us to Pili Provincial Park down in Essex County, not to Pili Island, but to Pili Provincial Park. And in the park, there is a marker for the 42nd parallel, and you can go walk south of the 42nd parallel down out onto the point of Point Pelee, and you are then further south than the northern border of California. The northern border of California is the 42nd parallel, so I was further south, or I was as far south as California on Saturday, and Pelee, by the way, is a really cool place to visit if you ever get a chance. It's a ton of fun. All right, I want to move on, and I want to talk about plots, because lots of stuff that we're learning, and by the way, why don't people send me more plot results? Man, I keep beating people over the head and send me yield results, send me plot results. That's how we learn. But those of you that do really appreciate it. So Woody, sending me his sulphur on soybean plot results. He planted April 30th. That particular farm is a clay loam soil. He looked at sulphur, he looked at nitrogen, and guess what? 0. The big fat 0. Now remember that Craig, on his sand soils in Elgin County, got 4.2 bushels, but that's a sand soil, and so there we would expect a response to sulfur. We get to a clay loam soil. Now April 30th is an early planting date, so you might expect something there. No manure in the history, so you'd say, yeah, potentially. No, in Woody's situation, the sulfur did nothing. The nitrogen, all that did was keep the beans tough and make them much harder to combine. So, as Horst said, there's going to be a lot of people do sulfur trials this year because we created some excitement, and a lot of those people are going to be disappointed. Woody's not really disappointed because we're learning. Pete, by the way, Pete did a sulfur trial on his farm, saw nothing as well, similar to Woody, planted the 29th of April, but on a silt loam soil. Sulfur applied, 0 response, so we have to keep looking at it. There are times it works, and if you're on a sand soil, for sure, but that's what Woody found this year. Ben, meanwhile, sending me a note that they are seeding a broadcast and incorporated wheat trial versus drilling a comparison today, that is this October the 1st, so that will be really cool. Now, Ben, I would say, man, it's super dry. A lot of us are super dry with the drill. In many cases, we're having to go deep. In fact, Brad down in South Lambton planted wheat, had to go 2.5 inches deep to get to moisture. That wheat emerged in 6 days. And in our yen group discussion, lots of growers saying, man, like Pete, you can say plant wheat at 1.25 inches. And physiologically, that might be right. But with wheat, we've really found that you're better off to be 1/2 inch deeper. And Trevor's saying because of the amount of soybean residue he has out in his field, that he just has to go to at least 1.75 or even 2 inches deep on his drill, because he gets better cutting of the residue when he has those discs in deeper, as opposed to hairpinning with that residue. And so, I mean, from that perspective, Ben, you broadcast and work it in and into dry soil. It will depend on how much moisture you have and when it rains, but we have to take that into account when we're doing these trials because it could be quite different just based on that. Meanwhile, on this half-inch deeper is better. Yeah, Adam's saying, yeah, that's true with corn. That's true with lots of crops. But man, don't do it with winter canola because if you seed winter canola and you get it too deep, it just takes forever to come up. And certainly on Adam's tough knolls, the winter canola emergence has been slow, slow, slow. Recent rainfalls should help, but slow, slow, slow. Sean, meanwhile, tweeting out that this is the third year in a row that he has seen early planted soybeans flop. And his question is, should we be using longer maturity soybeans in that situation because we just aren't seeing the yield gains that we would expect? So, Sean, in that Arthur area, one of the things we've learned over time, and when it comes to soybean seeding depth in the spring, oftentimes if you have to go deep and there's no rain in the forecast, in Middlesex County, we can go 2.5 inches deep, and we still manage to get a stand. When I go up into Bruce County, if you go over 2 inches deep, even though you're trying to find moisture, it's just like Bruce County, the soils are just that much colder. And when you go over 2 inches deep, it almost always bites you. You're better off to stay at 1.5 inches and wait for rain, as much as I hate that strategy. So I wonder, in this whole early planted soybean discussion, if that also plays. If you're in a very cool area, you plant early, and those beans, they struggle to emerge because it just stays that much colder. I don't know that for sure, but that is one of the things that really resonates in my brain. Dr. Dave tweeting out or responding with his data, and Horst Bonner, they've done a project there. There is little penalty in their data at Elora or at Winchester. Elora, it's a fairly cool site, not as cool as Arthur, but still quite cool. They see no penalty or almost no penalty to planting earlier, but they do not see a benefit to longer maturities when they do plant early. So we don't know the answer but that is an interesting observation and lots to think about before we seed soybeans next spring. Hey, I did ask about plots and combine monitors and whether or not the combine monitor adjusted for 10% or 8% beans. Got a couple of responses. Dave saying that the ag leader technology generally is set not to compensate for over dry beans, but that you can actually change those settings and you can get it to do that for you if you want to. Larry saying that his Gleaner combine, it does that. So kind of interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, if they're 8%, you don't get paid as if they're 13%, but it just looking at what the yield potential could have been, it is an interesting question. Before I move into the agronomy answers, just one last quick note. Ben Rosser and the OMAFA team are starting the Dawn survey, the toxin survey in the corn crop this week, I believe, and so we'll look forward to that report. But you would suspect, you look at the year we've had and say, oh, come on, no chance are we going to have any fusarium, any gibberella out there in the corn crop. It's not what we've been seeing. So as we've been scouting corn, and Adam, my great counterpart that scouts with me and makes recommendations and looking at corn, and we have been incredibly surprised with how much star bursting we are seeing in those kernels. Now, the star bursting is fusarium, and if it stays in those kernels and continues to progress, it could create dawn. But not only have we seen the star bursting, as we've opened cobs up. So here's one of the impacts of the drought in some cases, is that the cob is small. And because the cob is small, it's not pushing those husks out and making them loosen up the way that we would normally expect them to. The tip is just staying tight. And in those cases, I've been able to see the pink from fusarium, or even sometimes some gib on the tips of those cobs. Oh, it's not a disaster year, but if you're a hog farmer, for goodness sakes, get out there and check. There simply is a bit more out there than we expected. These dry conditions really should limit the progression. Having said that, dry conditions with still corn that is 28% or 33% moisture, and the disease still wants to grow inside that cob, it may actually produce more toxin because that's how it kills the next cell to move into the next cell. So just something to pay attention to, watch, and be aware of. All right, going to move into agronomy answers. First up, Kyle saying, hey, Pete, how long can I seed a cover crop? It's October the 1st. The beans are off. I could do it today. I'm going to corn next year. What do I plant? Or do I plant? Do I plant rye? Do I plant oats? What's the thought process? Well, first off, if you are going to corn, do not plant cereal rye. It's fraught with issues, not going there. If you are going to soybeans, cereal rye is 100% the crop you should plant because cereal rye will grow at the coldest temperatures. It will actually still grow at 0 degrees Celsius. Winter wheat is 2 degrees Celsius. So it would be the choice, not in front of a corn crop. The other thing is, how long do you seed? Well, the general consensus is that you need 6 weeks of growth. Now, the 6 weeks of growth, in order to build enough biomass to actually have any hope of an economic response or a gain in organic matter in the soil, 6 weeks of growth. Not true if all you're looking for is wind erosion, because even with 3 weeks of growth, you can often significantly reduce the wind erosion. You won't reduce soil erosion at 3 weeks. It probably takes 4 or 5, but we generally just say 6 weeks growth. It's October the 1st. The chances of getting 6 weeks growth means that you need to get to November the 15th. And most years, I would say, man, that's not very likely. This year, the 14-day forecast right now is well above normal temperatures, so maybe it's worth a shot. And as far as what to plant, the oats grow at cold temperatures. Barley does as well. Even winter wheat. You can go to the bin, just get some winter wheat, seed that as a cover crop. You won't get a lot of organic matter, but it will give you a nice root mass there that could do things for organic matter. The problem with winter wheat, of course, versus oat, is that you will have to kill it in the spring. All right, next, Matt saying, hey, Pete, okay, I think I might finally believe you. We are seeing the value of that 50 pounds of nitrogen on the oat cover crop like we have never seen before. It is twice as thick and it is taller, where we applied 50 pounds of nitrogen because a neighbor wants to graze it. And on the rest of our cover crop oats, we didn't do that. And I really do, the more we go down this road, that work by Dr. Dave, it just seems that the color, you can pick out the oat fields, cover crop oat fields, as you drive through the countryside that have had nitrogen applied. The other thing that really astounds me is where the oat has had nitrogen applied, I see far less rust starting in that oat crop. Now, it's not a rust year. We're not seeing the disasters in crown rust on cover crop oats that we see on a wet year, but you can still start to see that orangish tinge to some of the oat crop out there. If they have the nitrogen applied, they are simply able to tolerate or resist that oat rust better. And 50 pounds of nitrogen on the oat crop is really starting to make a lot more sense as we get further down this road. So that is quite cool. Brett saying, hey, Pete, the oat pea combination is 2 feet tall, man. Like the oats are about to go into head. Are we best to chop that? And my answer is absolutely. We want to keep that carbon to nitrogen ratio low, Brett. We don't want to get those oats really stemmy. And when you have that much growth, yeah, chop them off. You'll get a bit of regrowth this fall. You're probably going to do some tillage. Let's just not get into the situation where that residue becomes a negative rather than a positive. Josh saying, okay, Peter, we planted the oat cover crop after the winter canola, just like you told us to. We have so much volunteer canola that in spots there's almost no oat growth. We are going to corn next year. You talk lots about needing the oats to stimulate the mycorrhizae in the soil, our buscular mycorrhizal fungi, or AMF. Sometimes they get called VAM as well, vesicular arbuscular mycorrhiza. Fun words, right? They doesn't mean that much, but they are fun words. Josh, as long as you are seeing some oat growth, and what do? We could spray out the canola, but we still need some time for those oats to grow. And I really think that we will get enough oat growth there. But it is a great question and a good thought process when we get that much volunteer canola and we don't get oat growth. That could be an issue in terms of the subsequent corn crop. Kennedy saying, hey, Peter, double crop soybeans planted after second cut hay, no rainfall. They are a disaster. They might make 5 bushels. If we leave them, work them down, is there any value there? So we have not got good data there, but there's lots of anecdotal data that would say there's absolutely a nitrogen credit to next year's corn crop coming out of a soybean crop in that situation. They fix nitrogen. They tend to release it fairly late from what we can tell. So rather than go out there and mess around with 5 bushel soybeans, man, yes, I think you just take the nitrogen credit. By the way, though, one of the things we've also learned is that reduced tillage, no-till, whatever, into a soybean crop like that, it just seems to be a really, really easy win, which is a bit surprising because I don't understand it. Soybeans have no roots, but it just seems to work from that perspective. Moving away from cover crops, Olivier out of Quebec saying, Peter, man, we're no-till. We've had great luck no-tilling soybeans, but as our corn yields have increased, the residue is just beating us up. We're harvesting soybeans now. I know that the residue has hurt our yields. I read about in the U.S. where they spray products on the corn stalks to help with breakdown. Do those products work? Can I do something this fall? What options do I have to not let this residue beat me up the way that it is? So with Olivier, with the products that they use south of the border, there's very little data to say that they work very well even down there. But the problem in Quebec, the problem in Ontario, is that any product you spray, any biological, even if you apply nitrogen in the fall to try to change that carbon to nitrogen ratio, at the end of the day, what limits our biological activity, and whether you spray a biological or you add nitrogen to get the biology in the soil to work better, it's all biological breakdown. The limits are temperature and moisture. And so right now, it's actually too dry to get a lot of breakdown, but even if we had moisture, most of the time in the fall, by the time you harvest corn, the temperatures are so cold that no biology is doing very much. So anything you do simply does not work. There's great research out of Indiana where they looked at nitrogen on corn residue in the fall. It just didn't work at the end of the day. So when it comes to residue and with soybeans, one of the things, your 30-inch soybeans, and you're using row cleaners, the real thought process would be go in the fall, if you can, after the corn comes off, with just residue removers and push that corn residue back into the row so that next spring on your clay loam soils that stay wet under the residue, you have that cleared strip. Strip till could also work in that situation, but somehow I think the best answer is just push that residue out of the row area before next spring so that you can go back in and no-till and have better success. And with that, that's long enough. Dang it, that's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, October the 1st. Hey, keep the questions, keep the comments coming, keep the plot data coming, and I'll talk to you again next week for way too long yet again. See you then.
Thank you for downloading this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Syngenta. Remember to take those extra moments for safety checks, adequate rest, and staying alert in the field this harvest season. Your team at Syngenta wants you to remember that your most valuable crop is you.